Hey guys, and welcome to Should You Buy It, where all we do is talk a little bit about the game and whether or not we think it's worth the cost.
In this episode, we'll be playing No Man's Sky, the space exploration survival game where you will mine, trade, and farm while exploring new worlds and becoming one of the richest people to fly in the universe.
So the first question that we always cover in these videos is what stage of development is the game in? And in this case, No Man's Sky is in full release and available on PC as well as most consoles for $60.
So what exactly is the game? Well, No Man's Sky is set in a fantasy universe much larger than the one that we live in. You'll be doing a lot of grinding in this game, so let's start out by talking about the story, as it's the first grind that you're going to start. So in the beginning, you find yourself on an unknown planet, and your goal is to basically mine resources in order to repair your ship, so you can eventually leave. Once you do that, then you'll get contacted by Artemis, and thus beginning the main part of the storyline. Once you've met her, you just have to complete a few more tasks, and then you unlock one of the coolest parts of the game, which is the Anomaly. The Anomaly is basically just a quest hub and the gathering hub for all players. From here on out, the story will branch off into a few different strings, which we don't want to spoil for you because effectively up until this point was just the tutorial, and now the game has completely unlocked for you to enjoy.
So now that we've essentially unlocked the full game, let's talk about some of its mechanics. First up, one of the aspects of every game we talk about is the combat. No Man's Sky does have combat, but it doesn't have very interesting combat, at least from what we've experienced. I mean, we were a full 24 hours into the game and have still only come across the occasional pirate ship or maybe some sentinels that wanted to kill us, each of which didn't even pose a very large threat and were extremely easy for us to handle. Maybe there are some more difficult enemies further into the game, but so far it feels extremely mundane and almost annoying rather than it being an exciting part of the game.
Next up, let's talk about the main gameplay loops that No Man's Sky offers. First is the mining and gathering, which basically breaks down to shoot laser at thing and get resources. I don't know who came up with the idea of how gathering should work for No Man's Sky, and I know some of you might love it, but to us, shooting a laser beam isn't exactly the most interesting way to include a core gameplay loop in your game. Don't get me wrong, it was nice to not have to run around and gather everything, but it becomes quite repetitive as you find yourself standing still for long periods of time while gathering things a good distance away. Don't worry though, as standing still and shooting your mining laser isn't the only way to progress. In fact, you'll be required to use your little scanner to search for buildings, knowledge stones, and buried salvage in order to progress your character. Each of these are your primary source of unlocking new technologies or learning alien languages. Of course, there are other ways to accomplish each of these things, but these are some of the first you will be able to do. To give you an example of a more mid to late game way to progress your character, you can go and find abandoned freighters. These will have tons of nanites and other resources that you can also use in order to progress your account.
As far as what you were able to progress with in No Man's Sky, it is vast yet limited at the same time. What we mean by this is that you can unlock all the different buildings, the vehicles, and utility structures, such as refineries and portals, within about 3 to 4 hours of gameplay. However, there are a lot of different upgrades for your tools, your ships, and your freighters that will give you something to progress towards, such as maybe a hyperdrive upgrade that makes you consume less fuel when you jump between systems. Of course, this varies quite greatly, but most of them break down to just a stat upgrade to whatever you might be upgrading, like your mining speed or maybe your shield capacity.
After that is the exploration aspect of No Man's Sky. You pretty much start out with a basic ship that can only go so far, and after you play through the tutorial and gather enough resources to upgrade your ship, you're able to fly to and discover tons of new worlds and systems. While yes, the explorable universe within the game is near infinite, it feels a bit meaningless sometimes to discover a new planet or species that no one else has ever seen, since every single planet you come across, no one else will most likely ever see. Don't be too disappointed by this though, as there are some pretty interesting random encounters you can come across, such as a giant gecko space statue, or maybe a shipwreck in the middle of an asteroid field. These, along with many other random encounters, can happen, but encountering the same one twice is very rare.
Finally, what this game boils down to is make money to upgrade things in order to make even more money. Just to give you an example of how silly this can be, if you were to say, I don't know, sell 15,000 of a resource to a space station, and then you got 15 million units for it, you could then go ahead and buy all of those resources back for 5 million units netting you a $10 million profit without even having to farm something. You could then quickly jump to another system and rinse and repeat this process over and over again until you had all the money you could possibly use.
So now let's move into the pros and cons section for the video. First up for the pros is that the graphics were absolutely beautiful and really fit the space exploration theme. For an example here, ships look super awesome to fly, whether you were in the cockpit or playing in third person. Next up is that the vehicles felt fun and unique from one another. To clarify, we are talking about the ground vehicles in particular, like the Minotaur and the Rover. It was awesome to be able to use these as it made the ground play much more immersive than just walking around and mining things. After that is that the anomaly made the game feel somewhat populated, as it was the general player hub for the game. The coolest part about this though was that you could just warp it into any system that you were in order to use it. And it also just really gave me those Death Star vibes, which I thought was really cool. And last for the pros is that the game is continually updated and it seems to be consistently getting better over time. When No Man's Sky first came out, it was a completely unplayable disaster. However, it has gotten to the point now at which it is at very least playable, and they are offering most of what they advertised upon original release. I mean, just take a look at this table a user on Reddit made. It clearly shows they have added the majority of what they originally promised.
Now for the cons. First up, we have that the game gets very stale rather quickly. I mean, after about the first 6 to maybe 10 hours, the game just got very repetitive, and the core gameplay loop basically became fly to next place, sell things, buy things, go to next place, sell things, buy things, rinse, repeat. And to us, that's just not super fun. Secondly, we have that there is a lot of gameplay elements in No Man's Sky, but each of them feels rather shallow and just not fully fleshed out. I mean, there's not a lot to say about this. Every single mechanic we ran into, they were fun for the first 30 minutes or an hour, and then they just kind of died out and they weren't that exciting the second time around. Next up on this list is that the story wasn't that exciting and it felt like a series of fetch quests. I mean, there is some plot there, don't get me wrong, it's better than other ones we've played, but at the end of the day, every quest basically boils down to go here, do this thing, come back. Go there, do this thing, come back. Or maybe go raise your reputation by 2, come back. Nothing really too exciting or exhilarating. Fourth on our list is that there is just an infinite money loop in the game that is very easy to come across, and it completely breaks it. I mean, the economy crashing in this game where you can sell things just like we talked about earlier and then buy everything back for less completely breaks the whole point of trying to earn money and grow and become stronger or better at doing things, because they just don't matter when all you have to do is walk up to a little station, sell, and buy things back, and boom, you got 10 million units. Next up is that there was just a lot of bugs that we came across, some minor, some major. Just to give you an example, we had one situation when we were on a space station, I could not move because I was stuck in a wall. I don't know why this was, but it happened, and it was one of the most annoying things I had to deal with. Second to last is that the game does have multiplayer, but it's really not the multiplayer they want you to think it is. It seems like they want you to believe it's an MMO, but the only time you're ever really going to encounter anybody is when you go to the anomaly, or if you just happen to get incredibly lucky and see some random person in your system, but this never happened once in our full 24 hours of gameplay, so I wouldn't get too excited about that. Last but certainly not least was that the combat just felt very easy to avoid, and when you did get stuck into it, it felt more of an annoyance than it really felt interesting or fun to participate in. We had plenty of situations where we got attacked by a pirate when we were flying around and we were just like, oh, great, we have to deal with this again, rather than, oh yay, I get to fight off a pirate.
So now it's time for the rating for the game, and when we rate games, we want to get 1 hour of enjoyment out of every $1 that we spend on the game. So for this game in particular, in No Man's Sky, we would want to get roughly 60 hours of enjoyment out of the $60 that we both spent. And after putting 24 played hours into this game, we give it 4 out of 10 potatoes.
So to be honest, we enjoyed No Man's Sky quite a bit in the first 6 to 10 hours of the game. However, after that, the game became increasingly repetitive and extremely boring. I could see if you were looking for a fun space game that you might enjoy it and get your time out of it, but for most people, I would just tell you to stay clear. If you're looking for a good space MMO or maybe a good space survival game, there are many other options out there that will satisfy your desires better than this game will do it. At the end of the day though, for the average gamer who isn't sure if this game is going to be worth it, we would say that No Man's Sky is probably not worth the cost.
Now, if you guys want more money-saving content, consider subscribing to our channel, where we release new videos every single week, where we spend the money so you don't have to. Make sure you guys smash that like button, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.